everybody. This session today is Communicate with Heart. And I'm so excited for today because I have a good friend and colleague on as a guest today, Elizabeth Williams, who I will introduce later. For those of you who might be joining for the first time, welcome. I'm Helen Patterson. I'm the founder of LifeWorks Well. And we do everything with heart here. It really is a big part of what we do. And today's topic, we decided on communication this month for our theme, because I'm hearing a lot about toxicity in the workplace, people just having struggles communicating, miscommunication, change communication, all kinds of things. So I'm really excited about today. So we've got a couple of things. I mean, we jam pack a lot in this hour, so you know, and we also record it so people can also see it later. But we're going to talk about effective communication, some of the components of it, you know, how to touch on creating those safe spaces, how to just find some tips for managers and employees, talk about the top challenges. I have a few slides to share, and then we will be diving into a Q&A throughout, and you can put your questions in the chat as well. So before we begin officially, I'd like to welcome you again and acknowledge the land that we're on. I'm in Toronto, which is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, as well as many First Nations. We have September 30th coming up at the end of this week, and Truth and Reconciliation. I hope you will find some time to do some learning and unlearning and acknowledge the work we have to do here in Canada. We do a lot of work here on our journey of reconciliation. So welcome. If you want to put where you're situated, where you're coming in from, that would be great in the chat as well. Wow. It's so funny that we really never learned to communicate. Like we talk, you know, we learn at a young age to babble and all of these things. And yet how to do it effectively is something that we really, you know, unless you've taken that internal communications course or things like that, you know, we don't see that. So yeah, so we're going to dive into some of this later. I love my quotes. If you have any, pass them my way. I just want you, first of all, to take a quick reflection and think about what you want to get out of today's session. Maybe put that in the chat as well. And think about some of the times that you may have had some challenges communicating, or, you know, something you've been experiencing over the last couple of years. And we'll try to dive into that as well. I see that we have a couple of people. Caroline, welcome. I know you're new. I know we have a few others joining, so that's great. And we've got, everything covered. I love it. This is the beauty of sharing. And we'll touch on this a little bit later too, on how to communicate remotely and online versus being in the same room, which I do miss. Hugs to everybody. So there we go. Interesting stats. You know, I'm always sharing this. I will send out the presentation for everybody that signed up. We also put some resources on our website. But I don't think we're surprised by this, but I thought this was pretty interesting. Thank you to Mohini, who helps do some of our research. I think she was going to join hopefully later. 19% are miserable. Like, I don't know. I think it might be a bit higher, but it's the emotional detachment. But yeah, just, you know, there's a lot of people that aren't encouraged to socialize. And, you know, it is a part of getting to know your colleagues and people, right? It's important to connect. You can look at this later. I just found it really interesting because the work we do here, we really are working on healthy, heart-centered cultures, and communication is a big piece of it. Learning how to connect better physically, emotionally, our well-being. So again, there's some great stuff, and I'm sure Elizabeth is going to share some wonderful information with us later. And it's really, again, about feeling like you belong, creating those safe spaces, being able to be open and honest. Brene Brown, her clear as kind communication. Anyway, I'm going to introduce Elizabeth, and then I do have a bunch of other slides, but I'm just going to cycle through them. And really, I want us to be able to dive into this amazing, intelligent brain of Elizabeth Williams. I met Elizabeth back when we worked at ADP Canada together in the marketing and product management. I was in product management and marketing at the same time, and she just led amazing work in marketing and communications while we launched a new world at ADP, going from payroll to an HR tech and services company. So it was a big change initiative as well internally. But amazing experience, not only what's on here, as far as corporate consulting and internally in communications and marketing, but she's also was a journalist before that and a chef at one point. So there's a lot of other things that aren't even on here. She's a very cool person. Now she is going to be full-time at Centennial College on the faculty, and she's working towards her doctorate. She's been one of the top execs, has been on numerous, if you've ever been able to see her speak or listen to her on a podcast or on radio, just an amazing person and a really wonderful person to know. So we're very blessed to have you here today. Again, I'm just going to cycle through so you see what, you'll get to read this later. We're going to talk about empathy, all of the things you need. And I'm just wanted to get to the end. You can read this later. There's some blogs on our website as well at lifeworkswell.ca. You can join our newsletter. We give you a wealth of information to keep you on top of what you need as an HR professional, but also as a leader in your organization. So you can check that out later. And I will send out as well and I'll ask Elizabeth later where to find Elizabeth and myself. And I'm going to just stop the share because we are all about, I see other people here. Great. Thank you for joining. We're all about trying to open up this mentor circle, is a space to share and dialogue together. And I also think it's part of the Indigenous way as well. So not the old archaic way of having someone in the boardroom at the head and everybody else, or in our structures and institutions today. So really open up if you have a question. So I'm going to dive right in. Elizabeth, thank you again. I want you to start with, if possible, what you're seeing as the top challenges related to communication in your, because you also work at the college and with your clients. And also in the chat, if you want to put what you think is, we can kind of start there. I know we have a lot to unpack today.
So I have been studying and watching and being victimized by terrible communication in organizations for like 3 decades, which is just embarrassing, both that I'm that old and that it's still going on and that it's still so terrible. And I came to the conclusion years ago that the real problem is that we never teach managers, like frontline managers and up, how to communicate. Like no one sits them down and really teaches them. And we give them maybe the odd thing on active listening, which is lovely. We send them to a seminar to be an effective speaker, but communication is more than PowerPoint, and God help us, it's more than email. And I think that some of these really disturbing things we're seeing coming out post-pandemic, right? Like engagement levels are back down in the ditches where they were before the pandemic. Trust is down, stress is up. Like 50% of people say they are stressed daily at work. We've got the great resignation, the big quit. We've got quiet quitting, which is just people sitting in the corner phoning it in, which we've actually had for a while. We just didn't call it quiet quitting. We had a very rude term involving a dog, and it's miserable. And I think the pandemic really didn't help us in terms of the mental wellness of our workforce. And what's interesting is I hang out a lot with communications people, and they are all declaring victory. Yay! Executives finally figured out how important communication is for employees, in the pandemic. It was so important. And I actually just did some research on this, and I found out that executives all said, yep, we were totally prepared to communicate in the pandemic. Like 90% plus, we're totally prepared. But then I said, well, what percentage of your leaders have the skills to actually communicate with customers and employees? And less than half. Oh, okay. So you're prepared, but no one knows how to communicate. All right, well, let's move on. So you had dedicated, and these are bigger companies, you had dedicated employee communications departments. Well, no, we had someone in HR who sort of did it, and then marketing sometimes. I'd say, oh, okay. So basically what I learned was that, but when I said, well, tell me about how you communicate. Well, we sent everybody a new chair when they went home. It's like, that's not communication, that's sitting. And, oh, but we sent them an email about it first. Arguably also not communication. And so what I've learned is that managers and executives think they're communicating, and in fact they are. They spend most of their day communicating. They're not doing it well, and they're not actually making the changes that good communication should make. So good communicators, there's so much data on this. Good communicators engage employees, right? Like terrible managers have 3 to 4 times the turnover and quiet quitting going on than effective ones. And the thing that keeps coming up about why employees leave is they don't feel valued by their manager. They don't feel valued by their organization. They don't feel like they belong. Employers think it's because they're underpaid or overworked or something. And all of those are outputs of good communication, right? So feeling valued. And then you look and there's all this data about managers. And I'm like, okay, where are the managers in this? Damn it, go engage your people. And we find out that they're afraid to. They're afraid that 66% feel uncomfortable having conversations with their direct reports. Then why do you have that job? But when you dig a little deeper, you find it, well, they don't know what to do if they have to have a negative conversation or a conversation that might be taken negatively, because no one's trained them how to have a difficult conversation and have it in a productive, respectful way that doesn't turn into a toxic nightmare. They don't know how to give recognition. It's like the best thing ever. Recognition's good. Recognition is very rarely received poorly, and yet they don't know how. And it keeps coming back to this basic skill set. And I think, Helen, I saw on your slides, you've got, like just, and it's not being able to put 8-point type on a PowerPoint. They figured that out years ago. It's knowing when not to send the email, knowing when to talk to someone like this, knowing when to reach out, knowing how to really actually listen, knowing how to build trust, knowing how to build engagement, knowing what your job is. And so that, to me, I think is the window that's closing right now for us as we're bringing people back to work. I heard this morning they were saying it's something like 30% of people are back to work now in downtown Toronto in offices, and that's growing daily. And I just think like we had this great opportunity in the pandemic to rethink work and rethink communication. Now we're like, oh, God damn, we're back. And by the way, send that chair back. It was expensive. So anyway, that's sort of my particular rant for today.
I love that because what's sometimes so fascinating to me is that here we are. Sometimes I feel like we're 20 years later and some things haven't changed, even though the chaos and the crisis and whatever happened has changed. But these like effective manager communication has been a challenge for organizations for a long time. So, maybe we can talk a little bit about the tips, because I think you're seeing, I would say in some programs, some organizations, as part of their leadership development, they are starting to look at more effective communication. But do you have some recommendations or tips? I have several questions later, but just related to this, because I think about it, managers have that touch point with their team. Right?
Yeah. Well, I think first is to just acknowledge that managers are your communication secret weapon, right? And so a lot of these senior executives believe that they are the communicators in chief, which may be the case. And there's certain times, of course, you want to hear from your CEO. But the truth is that study after study after study shows that people trust their immediate supervisor more than they trust the CEO, the CFO, the chairman of the board, or anything like that, because it has to do with their day-to-day work, right? And so when we have managers who don't really know how to do it, or don't know that it's their job, then we're just losing that touch point, or the touch point is toxic, or the touch point is ineffective. I mean, I don't know about you, I've had multiple managers where you go in for your one-on-one and you come out an hour later with 3 new recipes and a hot stock tip, but you haven't actually discussed priorities, how you're feeling, what's going on in the organization. You haven't felt like you could ask questions that didn't involve football. And I think that goes on over and over and over again. In fact, at one organization that I worked at, the engagement scores were just terrible. And one of the things that we discovered in focus groups is that no one was having one-on-ones with their employees. Many of them weren't even having team meetings regularly. And when we dug in, these managers came back and said, I don't know how. Like, I've never been to a good team meeting and I don't want to have a bad team meeting, and they're a waste of time if they're bad. Or they're saying, well, I get one-on-ones and we just stare at each other for half an hour or talk about our kids. And yeah, I see a hand up.
Hang on a sec, let me unmute. Hi, Elizabeth, Joanne here.
Hi, Joanne.
I mean, I've got kind of the big question. Who's accountable for all of this? Like, is anybody actually saying, okay, I'm going to take it on, or I'm going to own it, or, it's time? Because yeah, as you can see by the color of my hair, been around for a little while, and this is not new. This has been going on for decades.
Yeah. And it's such a good question. I think that over the years, it's been a ping pong ball between HR and marketing, right? So HR's like, they get that they have to have a big hand in culture. They tend to have a few communicators stuffed into the closet working on the benefits book and all that. But it's not a skill set that's generally available in the leadership team of HR, right? HR's job is not, communicating. And in marketing, as I was in that role, and, when I saw the HR people heading down the hall and it looked like they wanted to talk about the holiday party, I was suddenly sick. So headache, out of here. And so, because marketing, again, it's who's your daddy. I call it's daddy issues, right? So marketing's daddy is revenue, market share, brand health. And HR's daddies are retention, cost of labor, benefits, cost containment, all that fun, compliance, all that fun stuff. So it's like the football that falls between, Charlie Brown and Lucy, and no one owns it. And so I think that really, you're quite right. It needs to be explicitly owned at the top of the house. So we're seeing more and more bigger organizations. I think this might be something that survives the pandemic. So people who were sort of managers and directors before got some fairly cool battlefield promotions during the pandemic. And so we see more VPs of communication. We see more chief communication officers, but these are in larger organizations. And so it is my fervent hope that they don't get sort of shoved into back into HR or marketing, or heaven help them, special projects, because that's just where your career goes to die. And that they have that seat at the executive table, but moreover, that they have a mandate not just to make their executives sound good, because I did that job for years. I was very good at making inarticulate people sound brilliant, but it was never my mandate to go down the organization, right? And so what we got was this conveyor belt of bad communicators bubbling up to the top, right? No one ever gets promoted on the strength of their communication skills because they don't have them. And so you get just new generations of these managers who've never really been taught, aren't sure it's their job. Occasionally you get a natural, you get one who can just knock it out of the park. I think of Tim Hockey at TD and, some of those just brilliant. They just do it. They know how to do it. But most of us have to learn it the hard way. And so, I think someone needs to own it. And I think the main thing is train your managers, right? Like, it's not rocket science. None of this is rocket science. But I think what we get is fractured training. So you might do a little bit of active listening, which is great. But active listening, now add in, framing, now add in storytelling, now add in, one-on-one communication, now add in how to manage and communicate in teams and use team dynamics. And when we start layering that in, we end up with a kind of tidy, nice curriculum where, okay, now I can put this together and I can develop the particular skills that I need. So we keep yelling at our managers, right? You have to be a coach and a mentor and authentic and transparent and,
empathetic.
Yeah, like all these leadership traits. You have to have like crackerjack empathy and all these different skills. And at the end of the day, the way you enact these skills or these attributes is by communicating, right? I don't know you've got all the empathy in the world until you tell me and show me you're empathetic. I don't know that you're a good coach or a good mentor or transparent or authentic or transformational or, pick your airport book. I don't know you're any of those things until you tell me and you communicate with me. And you don't know I'm engaged, stressed, burned out, ready to leave, stealing office supplies unless you're engaging me. And so I honestly think that the communication doesn't change till we train our managers, and then let those awesome, now experienced communicators who've made their mistakes move up in the organization. I think that's how we do it. So because a lot of the time, if you think about some of these CEOs or the C-suite, you know, they've been terrible communicators for 20 years, and I'm not sure that we can change that, but we can change someone who's only been doing it badly for a couple of years. And you know, and I think change always gives us the opportunity to do that. So like one of my favorite things is, you know, when you've got a merger, like a good change, a merger or your office move or something like that, is you get to actually force your managers to communicate. So you start to create these materials for them. We would always do a playbook. Remember, Helen, at ADP, where change was what we called Wednesday. And you know, but there's always a playbook for our managers. So here's your FAQ. Here's what to do if they ask you this. Here's how to do this. Go have a team meeting. Here's your agenda, like almost meetings in a box. And then we would go back and we'd say, okay, what worked? What worked well? What felt flat? What question did you get asked that you kind of got blindsided by? And that helped us get better. And I think to the blindsiding, oh my goodness, I think that's what the blog post is about this week, right? Is we don't trust our managers. Like, how many times have you had a big change and you're sitting on it and you desperately know that your managers need to have a 24-hour heads up so that they can sort of metabolize it and come up with their own talk track and make it relevant for their teams, right? And you're like, oh, no, don't tell the managers, VPs and up only. Yeah. And it's like, well, if you don't trust your managers with sensitive information, you've got a way bigger problem than I can solve. But it's like, why wouldn't you? Yeah, some of them are going to leak it. Yeah, some of them are idiots. Yeah. But if you at least give them a fighting chance, instead of saying at 9 a.m., at 10 o'clock, we're announcing this major downsizing that may or may not involve your team. And here's 3 reasons that you may or may not understand. And we haven't given you any context in your team. We haven't given you the information you need. And so you're going to, and so not only aren't you going to be an effective communicator, you're actually going to join the resistance, because you've been made to feel like an outsider in an organization that considers you a leader. You've been set up to fail in front of your team. You are not able to do the job that you have been asked to do. And so I actually think that we turn our managers into the resistance. And you know what it's like when you've got a rogue manager, right? They're not going to do anything. Oh, new timekeeping system? Yeah, when hell freezes over, my team will use it. And you know, when you get these rogue managers or who are actively sabotaging, right, the agenda that's coming down from above. And I think that we do that by setting them up to be terrible communicators.
Wow, there is so much to unpack. And that was what I was thinking about as I was digging into this month with the team and thinking about it, because we are asked often to come in and help with these toxic relationships or conflict. It's, you know, in HR. And by the way, I love marketing and communications. They're my best friend. I always say HR and marketing and communication need to learn to be BFF so that they can help with this. But I was thinking about part of what we've been looking at is the whole thing around, you know, we thought the pandemic would help soften people and bring humanity back into the workplace and in the world, and we had high hopes. And I'm still hearing all about this lack of trust and toxicity, and I'm seeing it and experiencing it and trying to facilitate open dialogue. But sometimes these people have been in the state for years and nothing was dealt with. So I'm just wondering, like, what are your thoughts on why you think there's so much toxic communication and conflict? And then again, are there, we've covered a lot, but are there some other things you think you could recommend for the individuals and the people actually creating the programs? You know, because I think we all have to take some accountability personally too, to be self-aware. So that was sort of a bunch of things in there, Elizabeth.
Well, I think one of the things we're seeing is the massive decline in mental health, right? So, I saw a stat just today that the risk of employee burnout is now 81% versus 61% before the pandemic, and 61% is no great shakes. And so I think what we've got is very stressed people very burned out people at every level of the organization. Like if we think that our managers and our chief executives are any exception to the decline in mental health, I think we've got people who are stressed, right? And so when we're stressed and we're feeling pressured, horrible things come out of our mouths. And so you get these regrettable conversations, and you've shared some you've been witness to, and I've seen a few. It's just like, wow, dude, that was so loud. And I think that's a little bit of just being very stressed. And again, it comes back to training, right? Like one of the things that we teach people in effective communication is how to put your emotion aside, right? So empathy doesn't mean that you are crying too. And, empathy is setting your emotion aside to focus on theirs. And I think that we've just got, again, a generation of now very stressed leaders who are just not equipped to have these sorts of conversations. No one's taught them to have a difficult conversation. No one's taught them, what do you do when somebody comes at you, coming up in your face, demanding something of you as a manager or as a leader. There are techniques to make that go away. The first one being, I'll talk to you tomorrow when you've calmed down. But I don't know that we equip them to do that. And I think we actually kind of throw them into the fire, if I'm being honest. So, if I hear about a toxic encounter between either colleagues or manager and employee, my immediate thing is, okay, whose stress is like in the red zone today? Because that's, reasonable people don't generally do that. And I think too, often there are no consequences. So we've both worked or seen places where at the top of the house, the dynamic is toxic and it is confrontational. And there's even that's cultural, right? It's like, we work hard, we play hard, we're rough and tumble. And so I think that's a cultural thing too, is if we allow, what's that old saying? You get what you tolerate, right? So when we tolerate these sorts of things at the highest level, we say it's okay for people to have these conversations and to be horrible to each other and toxic. And then we're batting cleanup, right? So the fix is to take the one toxic person and send them off for some training, so they don't say those bad things again. But that's not fixing the problem. That's just telling them these words are no longer allowed to come out of your mouth at work. But they probably knew that anyway. I don't know that we're fixing the problem, which is that they are maybe very stressed or maybe don't really know how to deal with the situation in front of them. And that's where, their manager and the manager above them needs, again, to do it. And I think too, I think we also need to redefine communication, right? So we have this idea that communication is email and town halls. Town halls did not die in the pandemic, and they really should have. Emails, town halls, road shows. We have this idea that that's communication. That's not communication. That's noise, but very little signal. And in fact, I've been talking the study that I'm doing. I'm talking to these executives. I'm like, okay, so you said you rocked your communication in the pandemic. Tell me how you rocked communication in the pandemic, and it's not showing up in the stats. And it's like, oh, we got Teams. So you gave money to Microsoft and you fixed your communications. Or we fixed up that intranet that was a piece of garbage before. Or we sent a St. Patrick's Day thing to every employee. And I'm like, it's like a birthday party. It's not communication. And so I think we also have to sort of understand that when we talk about communication, it's not the posters with the rowers. That's not communication. It's not even inspiring. It's not that. It's not, books, it's not town halls, it's the day-to-day one-on-one face-to-face encounters that our managers are having with their people. And those shouldn't be done by email, I hope. Those need to be, and they need to be taught how to do them and how to be constructive and effective, and to use all these skills that constitute sort of competent communication. And we need to stop pretending that it's an email. Oh, and we need to stop saying, please cascade as appropriate. We need to stop that. That needs to stop. That's just wrong. If I see another one of those,
Do people still do that? Oh my goodness.
Well, and we have this idea, right? So we have this picture in our heads when we say, please cascade, of a lovely brook, right? And the manager's like, oh, I'm going to send this to these 3 people and they're just going to totally understand it. But in fact, what it looks like, it either looks like Niagara Falls. So they go forward, all, boom, done. I communicated. And so now you've filled someone's inbox with something, if they even read it, is just like too much information, or they go, no, I'm mad at the CFO today, so we're just not going to share that, right? These tiny acts of sabotage and or malicious compliance. Yeah, so they sort of hide it. So now the water's behind a dam. So we've gone from a pleasant little brook where everybody gets the message to a fire hose or to the Hoover Dam, and might or might not be released. And so whenever I see please cascade, it's telling me that your top leadership team is too lazy to send it out to everyone, or it's probably not that important. And oh, by the way, the manager you've just asked to cascade this to has zero context beyond this email, right? So if you truly want to use the sort of top down, trickle down, everybody's getting the message thing, you need to not cascade, you need to prepare, right? So you need to say, here's a thing that's coming, and here's the messaging, and talk to your manager about how it applies specifically to your area. And so, yeah, and we need to do that. And that, I think, is why all these companies think they just rocked it in the pandemic, is because they went and got Teams and they fixed the intranet and they gave them Slack. Everyone got a chair, and once a month you put on a hat and you drank a Guinness with someone, and all good things. Like I don't think those are bad things at all. I'm glad we invested in our infrastructure, but I think that if we sort of conflate the functionalism of making the email work and making sure everybody had 3 screens on their desk with the more process driven stuff of having good conversations, I just kind of worry that we're just going right back to where we were pre-pandemic, only with a much less mentally healthy and, quite honestly, a much less tolerant workforce, right? So I read some stat, like 19 million Americans quit their jobs between April and September of last year. 19 million. Right. And they're just like, they're done. And so I think that poor communication is also not helping our talent shortage.
Wow. I don't know how we're going to, in another half an hour, get through all this, because I think I would like you to just be in my corner, sharing this knowledge and getting out there. I'm so glad we're recording so people can have this later, because
there we go. Now everyone knows what to do. Just go ahead and
I see that Nicole has a question, so I'll let her pop out. That's fantastic. Thanks.
Hey, Nicole.
Hello. Wow,
Hello.
that's a lot to unpack. I'm at the workforce right now, obviously, so I talk in hypotheticals, but hypothetically, as a team member, obviously we just talked about that there is a trickle effect from top down. So for leaders of others, I suppose, hypothetically during these one-on-ones, if you're not exactly getting the communication that you want, for example, back to that, talking about recipes, talking about this, that, the other, talking about everything that doesn't apply to you, is there any tools that you give to team members to kind of get their managers to kind of go back on track and communicate with them efficiently? Like, is there any tools that we have as a person that isn't a leader of others, that doesn't really have a lot to contribute for the higher ups, but at least with these one-on-ones, is there any tools we have to kind of communicate effectively and kind of get what we want from these conversations?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And thank you for acknowledging that people at the receiving end of the fire hose or the dam or the trickle have some agency too. And I think it's important that employees demand to have good face time with their managers. A couple tools that I've developed over the years. One is one we call Top 5 Next 5, which is something that you as an employee can do. So you basically just go into your manager, right? Because the whole point of most of these meetings is help me prioritize my work and tell me what's going on. And so top 5 is, here's the top 5 things I'm working on. And assuming they all go well, or they're at a point where I can walk away from them, here's the next 5. So we don't have the 30, 40, 50 item list of here's everything I've got on my list. Tell me which to work on. And so sometimes just sort of saying, okay, here's what I think my top 5 are. Help me, are these the top 5 that we should be working on? And then that can start the conversation around saying, okay, so I've got this thing that I've been asked to do in the email that landed on my desk, but I don't know what that means. I don't understand it. And so we can then use that as the jumping off point to say, okay, help me understand this, and almost say, maybe you need to go talk to someone who knows what this means in our context. So that's a thing. And then a great tool I developed actually at ADP with the brilliant HR people there is because we discovered that many managers weren't having one-on-ones and weren't having team meetings, or they weren't effective. So we created this thing called LeaderLink. And it was a 1-pager they got once a month. So the idea was that managers had to have at least one team meeting a month and at least one one-on-one with everybody a month. And so they would get a 1-pager, French on one side, English on the other. And basically what we would do is we'd say we'd have a theme each month. So 1 month, like if it was the end of the year, we'd do something about mental health. And so we'd say, in your next team meeting, here are a couple questions you can throw out there to get a conversation started about mental health at work. And then here's some resources you can point your employees to. And here's where you can go if somebody asks you like a terrifying question. And then we had this thing called Coaching Corner, which is where we would put in sort of 3 or 4 related things that these managers could use in their one-on-ones, right? So it'd be like, here's a question, just check in on their mental health. How do you ask somebody in a way that isn't gross or crazy how they're feeling, right? So we would give them, here's a way you can ask about someone's mental health without suggesting that they aren't mentally well. If you're concerned about them, here's what you do. You refer them to the EAP program. Here's some stuff you can say about your own mental health, right? So you can acknowledge, it's important to acknowledge that everybody gets stressed, everybody deals with stuff coming at them from different directions. So we did that, and it was really effective because we had a lot of managers who were very operational, right? These aren't people who came up through law schools and MBA programs. These are people who came up through processing departments. And so they'd had very little leadership training, if any. And so they found these really valuable. And the thing that they admitted is the best part about it is I can print it and read it in the elevator on the way to my meeting, and I know what to do. And so that was an effective way too. So we were able to arm them with enough to have a meaningful team meeting where we didn't have to talk about hockey. So those are 2 tools that you could try.
Appreciate it. That's very helpful. Because again, back to Helen's point, obviously there's, an expectation of all of us. It's definitely a 2-way thing. So appreciate those tidbits.
Yeah. And it's important that employees demand to be told the information that they want. I think too often we view employees as consumers of information as opposed to co-creators of information. And that's certainly with social media at work, right? Like where you've got people on Slack, it's not one way. It's 75-way communication. Everyone's piling in on how we should do this. And we ignore that at our peril, because if people feel like they're not being heard, then they're out of there, right? Or there
are so many layers that I think we're going to have you back again in the new year or something. Joanne has a question, and then I do have a couple more for later, but I love that all the participation today. So feel free to, whatever's on your mind, go ahead, Joe.
I just wanted to actually talk to Nicole. I've worked in smaller organizations, and one of the things that I learned along the way, because you want some information from your manager, kind of find out who they are, you can lead them too, so sometimes I would provide a document and say, this is what I want to talk about at our next meeting, or these are the things I'm doing, because depending on who they are, like everybody's different. Some people are really good verbally, other people need to read something first before they can come to a meeting, so they're a little more prepared, so I found that was really helpful too. And then the more I did that, the more I trained my manager. So I don't know if that helps you, but that was one of the things that worked for me.
No, that's definitely helpful, because I think, again, I'm in a much bigger organization. There is a specific process in place, but during my specific situation, I think it's a relatively new manager. So it's one of those, it's definitely a learning curve for both sides of us. So at least I know now that there are some tools on my end, at least, that I can help implement and get us back on track.
Yeah.
And really just being open. I think that's the biggest thing is, has the organization created that open space that's safe, that you can feel free to say, I'd like to discuss this, like, how can we make these meetings effective? Because you also want the human part of getting to know each other and building, because that's how you build trust too, which is a key element. But also, we've got to get to business here, because I want to be productive and I want to get, star ratings at the end of the year. Or if you do it more frequently, like we do, we're starting, or we recommend quarterly and monthly. So I have another question for Elizabeth, and then we'll check the chat after. And this is more for coworkers, because again, that's where it's not just within your team and your manager, that often there's the cross-functional teams, or there's people that are really pissing you off in another area of the workplace. And it's like, you know, there are things that frustrate you. So how do we communicate well with coworkers? And I think that's where, you know, I have a whole different session I can do on how to get yourself grounded so you're not letting negativity and toxicity in, and protecting yourself, and how to respond. But like for coworkers, what's, again, maybe it's the same as what we've already talked about, Elizabeth, but is there anything else that you could recommend when it's you're not in the same team, especially because we're focusing a lot on those difficult things where someone's not doing something on a project, or they're behind and it gets a bit sensitive, you know?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, you know, one of the reasons that everybody wants their employees back in the office is the hallway conversations, right? You're standing there waiting for the tea to boil and you're having a conversation with someone in another department. It's like, "No, you're working on that, working on that." So we want those sorts of things, but I think it's still, honestly, I still put it on the feet of the manager. And you know, I've worked in an organization where there was an incredibly toxic culture in one department. The sales department they had a leader who was a bully, and the bully culture was kind of rampant there. And this leader, in bullying his peers, made it okay for the people below him to bully their peers. And so, you know, marketing and sales work very closely together, and I was in marketing at the time. And so it was just terrifying talking to anyone in that department, because it had gone from a fairly collegial, occasionally fractious relationship, but one where we could escalate conflict and get it resolved, to one where you just walked in the door and you were getting ambushed. And honestly, you know, I can remember escalating this, like right up to the top of the house, saying, like, you have a real problem here. You have these two teams where it's not just, you know, they're a little stroppy with each other. It's like, this team is bullying this team. People are leaving, people are crying at their desks. But at the end of the day, you know, I looked at the leadership of that sales team, and that was the culture they wanted to have in there. That was the culture that worked for them. And that culture was rewarded by the organization. Right. So they kept hitting their sales targets, and the rest of the organization was like, you know what, we're going to leave them alone because they're just knocking it out of the park. It's like, yeah, at the expense of everybody else that they come into contact with. So I think, you know, again, people who are good listeners, empathetic listeners, decent communicators will always find a way to find each other on other teams. I think it's up to managers to facilitate those things, but it's really up to managers to be watching for those little cultural signs that things are maybe, you know, nasty, right? You know, those teams, it's not quite bullying, but there's those teams where it's a little intimidating because they're a little bit nasty, or they love to take the piss, and you don't want to go talk to them because you probably have a nickname, and you don't want to know what your nickname is in that team. And you know, and again, it's a cultural thing, and managers need to own it, and again, need to be trained. What do you do if if you're up against a team that's loaded up with bullies? And I wouldn't say that that's necessarily a communication issue. It's also a culture issue. And so I would argue that if we take culture as seriously as, you know, the coffee table books suggest we should, you know, that you can't tolerate it. So you get what you tolerate. And so that organization with the toxic bully culture in sales, as far as I know, is still there, is willing to tolerate it. They're willing to pay the price in terms of turnover in other teams, and unnecessary conflict, and files this thick of complaints. And it's like, okay, well then, you know, I don't know what you do about that if at the top of the house they are willing to put up with that stuff.
Well, that's where the HR team and the people team ideally come in to help clean up house a bit. But because I think that's the thing, I think we're moving into more in the future that these behaviors are no longer going to be tolerated. I think that what I'm seeing with newer generations coming in, I think they're a lot more open to point out behaviors that aren't acceptable. I mean, it all goes, we don't have enough time today because it all goes back to values, and are you really living them, and what kind of environment. And you're right about that grayness, because sometimes people are just, you know, this is their personality. They're just very tough. They're, you know, difference when it crosses over to actually starting to bully. And that's where the experts need to come in. I'm hearing there are even more and more investigations happening. Again, a topic that we could dig into later, because
Maybe
It's
too, Helen,
unfortunate.
it's modeling too, right? So we look at the people above and beside us and we think, oh, you're effective, we're going to do this. And I wonder if in the pandemic we're not in those informal, we're not sitting around a big table with a bunch of people at our level sort of watching how to act, right? So we bounce off each other. And so when you're making it up on your own because you're in your gym gems in your basement, you haven't had human contact for 3 days, it's probably not unusual to perhaps not act the way you should or communicate the way you should. And I love what Mindy put into the chat about shared agendas where participants contribute to the meeting. And it's a fantastic idea because it makes sure that your issues get on. And another thing you can do if you've got a manager who's willing is have a rotating chair of the meeting. So the manager doesn't always chair the meeting, get the summer intern to go around and get everyone's agenda items and to try to put an agenda together, because it's a skill that sadly lacks in most meetings. And, and you're right. And it co-creates that conversation. What do we want to talk about? And it's up to the manager to squeeze in all the stuff that fell out of the sky that week. But,
well, there's so much I want to still learn about what you're doing in your thesis and a few other things coming up. But because you just thank you very much for doing a guest blog for Life Works Well. So you can check it out on the website, or if you're on our newsletter. This you had some tips in there as well. And I thought, because the thing is, that I forget what the saying is, but we read it everywhere that, the only thing that doesn't change is the constant change, or something like it's constant. We're always going to have this what's next and how are things in the world, like whether it's moving to more technology, knowledge workers versus industrial revolution. Like we're always going to face that. And so you put in some great tips there on how to what mistakes not to make. But when you are dealing with change in your organization, how can the people here support that, and what to look out for? Again, that planning piece, and I think you talked about it, like really getting people prepared for it. But is there a few tips you could give us and for those who are here today?
Well, I mean, I will always say that, your biggest ally and your worst enemy in a time of change is that frontline manager, right? And so, so if you leave them out, so the first mistake is forgetting about your frontline managers, right? So I always call them the chaos prevention team. So if your frontline managers know the messaging, they understand the rationale for the change, even if it's a good change, then they're going to manage the chaos and the rumors. I think there were some rumors. And they're the people who stop those rumors. They're the people who go, where did you hear that? No, that's not true. And they can say truthfully, it's not true, I'm pretty sure it's not true. And I really hope it's not true. So we need to involve our frontline managers as early in the process as we can. And I always say, again, if you don't trust them, then get better frontline managers. I think also defining stakeholders. I think one of the other things that when the change ferry comes along, we sort of focus on the people who are kind of getting kicked in the teeth by it, whether it's a downsizing or moving or something else. But if you take a little bit of time, and we can share, I've got a little worksheet, and I'm happy to share, where you can define your stakeholders in a change thing. Because if you really think about it, it only takes 10 minutes. You go beyond the obvious people. So for example, in a downsizing, the obvious people, the people who are losing their jobs, and possibly the managers who have to deliver that fun news. But then if we keep going, it's like, well, what about the survivors? What about their coworkers who didn't lose their jobs, but have to look over at Helen's empty desk and watch the sales team steal the staplers? And what about the customers or the suppliers who had relationships with those people? And what about the rest of the organization that just heard, oh my God, they fired everyone in marketing. They got rid of 2 people, but of course the rumor mill has now taken off and it's everyone. Armageddon. And so, but if we take the time to sort of think about all the different audiences, we'll realize that they have different messages they need to hear. And we need to arm those managers to have those talks, right? So it's not, yeah, I think I heard something about marketing being eradicated, but I don't know. How about them Jays, right? Like that's helpful, but you haven't set that manager up to do anything more than actually foment rumors. And if your managers don't know where to go and get that information, so if they go up to their manager and say, hey, my team's saying that marketing just got blown away, and that manager's like, Where'd you hear that? So now you've got two managers who are about to join the resistance because they feel out of the loop and they're embarrassed. And so we need to figure out who those stakeholders are. I think the other thing that I always talk about is that, you know, we tend to measure change in terms of victory, right? And so I asked all these executives in this study I just did, were you effective communicators with your employees, your customers, the government, the media during the pandemic? Oh, hell yes, they were. Rock and roll. Why then trust and engagement is in the toilet? I know not, but part of it is that they are measuring the wrong thing. So I think that what they're saying is, yeah, we communicated well because we were able to communicate. We got Teams, we fixed the intranet. Nobody died, nobody quit. And so they sort of claim victory because they survived it, right? And so I think that sometimes when we have a change, we don't really measure the things we should, right? So we measure, did you understand, you know, did the cost cutting work? Did the downsizing go smoothly? Is anybody suing us? We look at those things, but we don't go back to, you know, frontline people and frontline managers and say, do you understand the reason we made this decision? Right? Because the best decision is not the one you agree with, it's the one you understand why it was made. So do you understand why we made this decision to get rid of all of marketing? You know, do you understand how it affects you? And as a manager, did you feel you had the material you needed to answer your team's questions? And if not, where were the gaps so we can learn? And we don't ever measure that, right? We might do an engagement pulse check and go, ooh, engagement fell the day we blew away all the people in marketing. Well, I guess that was the brakes, right? Of course it's going to fall. So I think that we need to measure the right stuff. I think that we need to sort of treat change as a thing, as a task. Like someone needs to own each change. You know, so I think we need to sort of stop. Like we measure awareness a lot. So we go, did you hear? We blew away the marketing department. We're outsourcing the whole thing. And people go, yes. And we go, great. We succeeded as communicators because people are aware. But I think that we also need to make sure, and please know what to do, right? The point of good communication is to change a behavior. So if as a result of the marketing department being eradicated, you know, you may have stakeholders in sales who are now doing marketing work. Did you tell them they were going to do that? Do you know what you want them to do? Or if we're just trying to change a behavior about you know, compliance or inclusion or diversity. All the messaging in the world isn't effective unless somewhere along the way you said, Helen, this is what you need to actually do to support our inclusion policy. And so, so I think we have to do that. And then I think the other, of course, the big thing in my little survey, less than half of large employers in North America had a crisis communications plan in place in March of 2020, 45%. And yeah, no communications plan.
I'm surprised.
No, you're not. You know why?
Well,
because if you go in and you go, okay, so go find your crisis shelf when you're back in the office. Nicole, you're in the office, go find it. And there's this binder and it says, doesn't say crisis, it says business continuity plan.
You're right.
Right?
That's
because,
what we did after
and
SARS.
It's a binder full of how to move the production, how to keep the revenue going, you know, how to protect our reputation, how to protect our physical plant, all really important things, how to protect the data. Oh my goodness. And it always assumes that the crisis is either whether a badly behaved executive or somebody stealing something. And those go away in 3 or 4 days, occasionally a few weeks. Pandemics apparently never end. And so, but then, so there's your binder and it's, you know, here's what we're going to do if there's a flood in Halifax, and here's what we're going to do if there's an earthquake in Vancouver, and here's what we're going to do if the CFO is caught leaving the country with a bag full of cash. But at the back of all of these little binders, there's this tab and it says communication. It's in small letters because it doesn't quite fit. And then you open that tab and there's like
barely
one page,
made the binder, right?
Right. And it's a call sheet. And it's home phone numbers of people who don't work there anymore. Maybe it's a call tree. You know, Helen calls Elizabeth and Elizabeth calls Nicole. Nicole calls Joanne. Fun, right? What are we, a bridge club? And yet nowhere in there is there, you know, here are the key messages that these different stakeholders need to hear if these happen. Here's the role of frontline managers. Who's going to give frontline managers a daily update? And we figured out how to do that darn fast in the pandemic. We didn't do it well, but we figured out that we need, I hope, that we needed to do it. So I was working with a logistics company in the early part of the pandemic. And the first thing we did was a daily cheat sheet to every single frontline manager with the latest whatever we knew. And we were like, probably isn't true, but Public Health Canada is saying this. And, so we could at least give them something to say when they went into, it was a warehousing company. So they had these morning huddles. So at least they could go in and say, okay, masks are mandatory, probably airborne. Yes, you can use the toilets, it's that kind of stuff. And then we had a feedback loop where we said, what are you getting asked? And we had an anonymous email, just tell us whether even it's stupid, just tell us what questions you were getting. But that nowhere was that in the handbook, like the little playbook they had and they did have a little SARS playbook, but the communication was like, here's the number for public health in Peel. And then here's a bunch of people who don't work here anymore, and here's their home phone numbers, or the people who still work there didn't have home phones anymore. And then there was the awful realization that there were 4,000 people who worked there, and the organization didn't know how to reach them because they didn't have corporate email because they worked in a warehouse. We didn't have phone numbers for any of them, like anywhere accessible. And so, so we had to very quickly figure out a way to text all these people. Like if we had to shut down a facility, say if there was an outbreak, and we had to shut it down, or we just had to close it down. And it was like, wow. And so there was the functional thing. Nowhere in our little binder did it say how we were going to do that. But then also, what were we going to say? How do you tell a whole bunch of frightened people making $14 an hour and taking the bus to work in April of 2020, don't come to work today because somebody's infected? Like, how do you say that in a way that doesn't have them screaming in the streets? And so none of that is included. And so I hope the thing that we learned, and I'm pretty sure we didn't, in this is you've got to have a big fat communication section in your crisis plan, because the next one's coming. It is, and it will be a data breach, or it will be Fiona, or it will be something. Like, we're not out of this. Activism is a big risk now, employee activism, and nobody's got a plan for that. So what happens if your employees start publishing your payroll because they're mad at you? Yeah.
I'm sure it's coming. Well, because we only have a few more minutes, and I see that Nicole has a question. So I want to make sure you covered my final question in that last bit about emergencies and crisis and leaders and what to do. But I just really was thinking about that whole, when people were leaking the recording from these downsizing videos, those CEOs that did
let people go on Zoom. Yeah,
that was their version of Cascade. By the way, you're all losing your job today. Sorry. And now you're on all over LinkedIn,
and your employees are cascading it right out the door.
You can't win, right? But I want to be mindful of the time, so I want to have Nicole ask her final question, and then we'll do a quick wrap up after. So this has just been great. So Nicole, over to you.
Sure. I'll also be very mindful of time, but a lot of food for thought through the session. But on the topic of big changes and following that, and in alignment with the fact that communication and trust with your direct managers is so important. Hypothetically, if, for example, there's a big change that happens and you totally lose trust with all the stakeholders, but specifically your direct manager, for example, you've lost that trust, you've lost that kind of bond or anything between the two of you. Following that, is it just Armageddon, or is there any recovery following that? Or if once you lose your trust with your direct manager, is it done?
I think the onus is on the manager to understand that trust has gone. So trust's a bank, right? Or a battery. You fill it up with goodwill by doing what you say you're going to do, by recognizing people, by trusting people in turn, and you fill that up and then you draw on it in times of change. And so, so if that trust bank is empty, and you don't see your managers actively trying to refill it by listening to you and communicating with you and trusting you and recognizing you and doing all that good stuff, it's probably time to get onto Indeed and update your profile.
Good to know. Thank you.
There you go.
Oh my gosh. Oh, wow. We're at 1 o'clock already. I just knew this was going to be a fun session today. So I wanted to just say thank you to Elizabeth for joining and for sharing all of your wisdom. And
thank you for having me.
Oh, it was so, I mean, we could just go on and on because there's so much to unravel. And I know we tried to get at most of the topics, but just as a quick wrap up, I will send the recording and we'll get a little feedback form that'll usually go out. We will also share the resources with you that are in the presentation itself, and then Elizabeth, what she mentioned. And then Elizabeth, thanks for joining, Bridget. So great to have you here today too, and Edison and Mindy and people that I haven't met before. So I just love it. And Elizabeth, so with this study that you're doing and the research, how can people get that later? Where's the best place to connect with you going forward?
So I put my email in the chat. So happy, just throw me an email. Find me on LinkedIn. It's Elizabeth S. Williams. And I shared a book I just started to read that's depressing but important. So I will be publishing it with my partner Proof, probably in the next month or so. I'll be presenting it at a conference called I4PL, which is about education, and none of you should go to that. And then, yeah, hopefully I'll maybe pitch it to HRPA or something. So yeah, and of course, once the white paper is written, if you want a copy, just let me know. I will be happy to send it out to you. And then I'm going to write like 3 or 4 really boring academic papers. So if you can't sleep, just let me know.
And so thanks again, and to everybody here.
Yes, thank you, everyone. It's lovely to meet you.
I'm so thankful that you would spend this hour with us. I hope you had a little takeaway. You can put that in the chat before you go if you have time. Next month, we're not holding a mentor circle because I am going to be in Africa on a mission and climbing a mountain. And who knows what will happen when I come back in the future at the next evolution of Life Works Well. And life works well when you do, remember that. And then December, November, we're going to focus on mentoring again. And then December, we have a guest who's going to be sharing about corporate social responsibility and volunteerism. And so that will be great. And it's actually the woman that's running this program that I'm going to, called Yugo Impact. And I'm a believer of, incorporating wonderful HR programs and people programs within your org, but also how do you then give back to the community and the world and make an impact? And I know a lot of people here are on side with that too. So stay tuned. Check out our website if you haven't, lifeworkswell.ca. You can sign up for the newsletter. You can follow us on all the social channels. Speaking of time and communication, but it's been fun. We have fun. So that was the other thing. Have fun in your meetings. Today was fun. So thanks again, everybody. Hope to see you again soon, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Helen.
Bye.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Nicole.
Thank you. Bye.
Gonna